Hey, what's up everybody? Remember, if you like the videos, like, sub, silly, comment, share, support the channel if you want. It does help, thank you. Another one of those videos of responding to people who think they're smart. Responding to retards, basically, so we'll talk about Street Fighter 6, I guess. This guy says, I know nothing about Street Fighter mechanics or legendary mechanics in video games. Yet, of course, when I ask him who has done more in terms of, progressing the meta of all these games, who has changed the perspective on all these games, who has brought all the tech to these games, who more than me? Of course, he can't tell you, right? But I know nothing, supposedly, about all these games. He also has me in quotation marks saying that I think it's a bug that attacks hit ducking opponents. I've never said that. I've just said that I think it's stupid for an attack that does not look like it's hitting you to be hitting you, to standardize a game to make everyone kind of function in the same way. And I also think it's hypocritical that the community will complain that they don't like attacks that can hit behind them, etc., despite the attack swinging back, if you will. But as we see, this fucking retard here thinks it's okay that attacks that aren't even hitting you, you're forced to get hit by it when you're ducking under them. I think that's retarded. But what do I know? I don't remember ever saying it's a bug. But what actually kind of the meat and bones of this video, though, is the guy says, you also state that it's my meter versus your meter. Bro, that's every fighting game. Oh boy. That's not every fighting game. Can people actually mention in the comments, and this is what the discussion can be about, can anyone actually mention in the comments any other fighting game that has been as much as Street Fighter 6 where it is my meter versus your meter? Because offhand, I couldn't even tell you, let alone that you want me to believe that every fighting game has been like that. Not every fighting game even has meter. You know what I mean? Oh, what are you talking about? Okay, let's go back to Super Turbo. Super Turbo, is it your meter versus my meter? Well, even in the first Street Fighter with meter, that's not how the game is played. You know what I mean? Characters, first of all, you have super characters that get used that don't even have meter. And then second of all, it's drastically different how useful some characters' supers are versus other characters. If we're looking at a character like Ryu, classically, we would say that he has a good super in the game. But guess what? Say if he's versing a character like Balrog. Well, if Balrog has a super, Balrog has a better super than even Ryu. Balrog's super kind of makes Ryu's super null and void. You know what I mean? We could go into all the meta of fucking Super Turbo, but Super Turbo is not a game of your meter versus my meter. You know what I mean? Even the very first Street Fighter that has meter. Street Fighter Alpha 1, is that a game? The next year, is that a game where it's your meter versus my meter? No, it's not. You know what I mean? A game like Street Fighter Alpha 2, maybe Street Fighter Alpha 2, definitely I could see a perspective of there's a mind game of my meter versus your meter because the meter is so integral to the game. But Street Fighter Alpha 2 is such a busted game in the first place. Is that your argument? King of Fighter games, are all King of Fighter games your meter versus my meter? No. You know what I mean? What I was getting at Street Fighter 6, and it shows it's actually it's incredible that I even have to make these videos because I'm constantly reminded just how retarded people are. Street Fighter 6, it is your meter versus my meter. The characters are so standardized in how they work. It is so integral to characters' movement, to how characters can combo and link off of things. You know what I mean? It's completely integral to the game. The game is completely my meter versus your meter. That tug of war of my meter versus your meter. That is the game. Have you seen? Do you see these matches of Street Fighter 6? That's how the game is played. My meter versus your meter. And I'm not saying, and I've said before, I don't think that Street Fighter 6 is the worst fighting game ever. It's certainly more competently made than Strive. But to try to deny that when you watch people play the game, it's not my meter versus your meter, it's the entire game. You know what I mean? And he tried to use some idea of drive impact. Well, you can also land 3 hits and knock them out, or you can simply neutral jump and whiff them. Well, what are you talking about? You're assuming that someone's just randomly doing drive impact for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? Realistically, in the matches that I see, when people actually beat drive impact, they are using some form of their meter to beat it, right? It might be their super meter, it might be their EX move, it might be their own drive impact. My meter versus your meter. The game is a constant tug of war of my meter versus your meter, because the characters all, in a way, kind of use the meter in the same way. They use it to drive rush in. They use it to add more frame advantage. They use it for drive impact. There's all that kind of stuff. And I even said one of my fears about the game, which unfortunately has turned out to be true, is that although I like the idea that, differentiating the idea of having your super be a different bar, besides these other kind of more versatile, let's call them options, you know what I mean? Because inevitably, as I've said before, when you have many versatile options, a lot of times those versatile options, because they cost less meter, you don't see supers as much, because these versatile options are more versatile. They cost less meter. They're more useful. But unfortunately, as I feared, I was like, I hope that supers don't just become combo fodder. And unfortunately, when you watch the game, is it not true that a lot of these supers are they not combo fodder? You know what I mean? I mean, look what I showed with Ryu Shinshuriken, his anti-air super. Someone tell me, it is so ridiculous that I can do a counter hit super, or even a dragon punch counter hit super to dragon punch, and it does less damage. But if I do a combo hit into a Shinshuriken, the Shinshuriken has less of a damage buffer. That makes no sense. If I just do a regular anti-air counter hit into a dragon punch or super, the game gives it a bigger damage buffer than if I had done a combo into it. That's retarded. Again, do I need to say it for a third time? Have I said it 100 times now? I don't know if I said it 100 times. If a guy jumps at me and I do a dragon punch, and then I anti-air them, it's a counter hit and a super. The super has a bigger damage buffer on it than if I were to combo into, say, thrust kick, then do the dragon punch, and then super. The super has less of a damage buffer. The game actually encourages you to not use your anti-air super as a anti-air super. That is retarded. That is not good game design. That is homogenization of characters. And again, I never said that it's a bug that I think that attacks hit ducking characters. I think it's fine. I just think it's dumb when all attacks basically do it. I mean, go watch Daigo play. No, seriously, go watch Daigo play. Daigo has been playing Ken, right? Now, do you not see, if we think about Street Fighter classically, this guy apparently he's a classic Street Fighter master. He knows about all the legendary things. If we think about classically, since Super Turbo, when they gave Ken his stand roundhouse that hit ducking opponents, because you got to remember, back in the day, Shotos didn't have all these sort of like standing normals that could actually hit ducking opponents, right? But they gave it to Ken to give him a little bit of an offensive flair, right? You know what I mean, if you will. A different kind of way to poke and using footsies, right? But look at a game like Street Fighter 6. Because Ken's stand fierce now hits you ducking, even though it doesn't touch the opponent, how often do you see Ken stand roundhouse? You actually see Ken stand fierce now as the check, as the poking attack, more than Ken stand roundhouse. Even though his stand roundhouse hits further, it's classically this guy who's a classic legendary Street Fighter master. He knows about all the mechanics. You know what I mean? You don't see Ken stand roundhouse as much anymore. Now, normally when you watch people play, they're using Ken stand fierce. Because it's like, well, why would I use stand roundhouse? Other than the fact that, well, I guess it goes further. You know what I mean? But guess what? Stand fierce already hits further than it looks like. And it hits you when you duck. And I can cancel into it and use my meter to get something off of it. That's homogenizing the game, dude. You know what I mean? It's fucking retarded. Again, this isn't to comment that Street Fighter 6 is not competently made, or at least more competently made than other games, is just calling a spade a spade. And like I said, I just it's what I said. I feel like the people that will like Street Fighter 6, and I can appreciate it from a certain perspective if we're thinking about what would like a young person say nowadays, like the mental stack of a video game. I can appreciate the idea that some players will like the mental stack of constantly my tug of war of my drive bar versus your drive bar. You know what I mean? Oh, who's going to go into burnout first? Or if I go into burnout, I hope I wagered my bar versus your bar better. You know what I mean? I can appreciate the mental stack of, accurately, competently using your bar, you know, whatever, versus the opponent's bar. But it doesn't change the fact that again, I've said it before, it's amazing how retarded people are. It gets boring saying the same thing over and over because I'm never fucking wrong. You know what I mean? It's like you're talking to fucking, well, most people are retarded, like I said. So, I mean, what are you gonna do, dude? Right? I mean, I said that I don't think that, real, true, let's say lab monsters will get a lot of fun out of Street Fighter 6. Because you know what I mean? There's not an actual lot of interesting interactions, right? And just like what I've talked about before, the potential complexity and redundancy. Although you want to say Street Fighter 2, maybe so many normals look like they function in the same way, just these different moves all functioning in different ways, not having such pre-planned, properties. Every move has to work this way. Every move has to work this way. You ended up having that sort of balance in the chaos, right? You ended up having these weird kind of counters to different moves. You know what I mean? Now, like, where's the, say, if you're a lab monster, you know what I mean? Which a lot of people are, you know what I mean? Even people, they want to act like they're not lab monsters, but they're not truly competitive. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of, there's not a lot to discover in the game, right? There's not a lot of weird interactions to discover in the game. That's why I said I hope that someone finds a bug or something to flip the game on its side or something. But I imagine that the person that likes this game is the person that appreciates the my bar versus your bar. They appreciate that mindset because that's a mindset you don't get in another fighting game. In all fighting games, they need to sell you, again, when I talk about how you sell a video game to a consumer, you need to sell the game on how do you get something in this game that you can't get in this other game. And that's Street Fighter 6. Street Fighter 6 is you get this clear tug of war of my meter versus your meter. And that is not in other Street Fighter games. Because if you look at the characters are pretty boring. Right? I mean, it's funny. You have, again, I said before, in a way, you have the most drastically different characters, let's say, if we're just to compare Ryu to Ken, the most drastically different Ryu versus Ken ever, maybe, in a fighting game. And yet, why do they feel so boring and stiff? Isn't that weird? You have the most free game. The system should make you feel so free, whatever, right? You know what I mean? There's so many different ways to use your meter, but guess what? It's like a fake freedom because you're all using the meter almost in the exact same way because the characters are so dry, dude. Like I said, it would have been better if, I talked about before, I was hoping that there was going to be something more interesting if, like, maybe the Slimer bar, affected some of your specials too. It's unfortunate. Like I said, it's not like there wasn't an idea there, but you can just tell that the game was made by someone that it's like they didn't actually play the game. They had an idea and then they didn't actually like test it out. Or, some robot made the game and then someone just went in and they're like, you know what? I don't really like Dragon Punches, so get rid of that. I don't want my anti-air super to actually I don't want the person to actually, I want everyone just to do this combo. You know what I mean? Like there's clear brain farts and retardation when you look at the game. Anyway, I mean, I don't really. Again, I can't think of it. I can't think of any other. I can't. Let alone to say that every fighting game has always been about your meter versus your meter. I can't even think of it. Not all fighting games even have meter in the first place. Super Turbo, the first game with meter, God, it's not your meter versus my meter. You know what I mean? Super Turbo, you can use characters that don't even have meter. Some characters, if I have meter, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Some characters, if I have meter, it matters because the characters are special. The characters make the system special, right? The characters are what make it special, dude. Alpha 1. Alpha 1 isn't your meter versus my meter. It's actually special. If you think about Alpha 1, God, even thinking about Alpha 1, who's a clear cut example of a character has meter, you know what it would be? And I've said it before. Alpha 1 would be Rose. Rose is the one character that she does not logically make sense if you're thinking about her from a grand scope of the game, that she seems out of place. Look at Rose. Rose is a clear character, you would say, in Alpha 1, that is when she gets meter, you're like, oh God, I gotta worry about getting unblockable fucking Rose shadowed or some shit like that. But every other character, it's a little bit different, right? Every character uses the meter in their own kind of like special way. They feel special. It's not necessarily my meter versus your meter, because the meters aren't functioning in the same way. Just to say my meter versus your meter is already in a way implying that it is homogenized, is it not? Alpha 2, the one game that I said that maybe you could say it's my meter versus your meter, is in fact, if you will, proof that there is some homogenization in that game. Because if you say my meter versus your meter, that is in a way implying that every character uses the meter in the same way, which in Alpha 2, indeed, it is often for most characters just to do custom combo, because custom combos are so much better than supers. Generally speaking, not that no character ever uses supers, not saying that, but generally speaking, custom combos are so powerful in that game that yes, it is my meter versus your meter in that sense. But that game is also implying and alluding to that homogenization of games that I talk about. But besides that, no, I mean, I can't really think of it. King of Fighters, it's not your meter versus my meter. It's a clear idea in Street Fighter 6, my meter versus your meter, the tug of war. There's another analogy that's on the tip of my tongue that I want to relate this to, but it's eluding me at this time. I'm gonna have to think of it, but yeah, I mean, again, I can watch matches of Street Fighter 6 and I can be like, okay, the game's not terrible, but I just don't like how it plays. You know what I mean? The system is not that interesting. The characters are kind of boring. They don't feel that fun to play, I don't think. And the meter, it's actually not that fun to me. The game is just too rigid. It's too stiff. It feels like it's already been played for me. You know what I mean? It's like imagine that God, I wish I could think of this analogy. It's like imagine your friend brings over a new game for you to play as a kid, and he tells you that you can only play it in this certain way, and that he's already decided how it must be played, right? And it's like, oh, I can do this, and he's like, oh no, well you can't do that because that's how this has to work this way. This has to work. And it's like, oh, so the game is you're already telling me exactly how the game is played. It's just a matter. It's really just, oh well, am I gonna wager my green Slimer rush here? I hope my mix-up works here because my character doesn't do mix-up this way. Oh, well, I link off of this with here. Oh, but you link off of your move like that. We're all kind of using the meter in the same way, dude. Oh, drive impact here. Oh, this guy, oh, we always do 3. You say, oh, you just jump out of it. But no, that's not how the game works. We already know that. Generally speaking, if you've watched the gameplay, most times when people are beating another person's drive rush, they are using some form of meter to beat that, or the drive impact, if you will. I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. Drive impact. You know what I mean? You're using the same thing. Like I said, the game has some interesting things. Like I do think, the drive impact in the corner, and if you're in burnout, the dizzy thing. I would actually say that. I mean, to be honest, I would say that's the most interesting thing about the game. Actually, I think that's the most interesting probably part about the entire game. I would say. I think if I had to say my favorite thing about the game that brings something new to a fighting game, I would probably say the idea that, if you actually drive impact a guy when they're in the corner, when they're in that burnout meter, they get dizzy. I think that's an interesting way to put dizzies in the game. I guess if I were to think about it, right? But The other stuff is just kind of eh. And I said EX moves are bad for video games. I've already talked about that enough. But anyway, I'm gonna go block this guy because he's just a little too retarded. I've given him. I like how he says that I'm cringe. Oh god. Oh god. I bet. What does this guy look? Oh, he plays Guilty Gear Strive. Remember when everyone said I was gonna be wrong about Guilty Gear Strive, and then Guilty Gear Strive? People were saying that no one would have predicted Guilty Gear Strive unless we hacked the game to talk about it and explain how the wall was going to work. And it's like, dude, I explained it years ago. Oh, he plays Dragon Ball Fighter Z. Oh, God. A game that has almost nothing without me. Oh, fuck me. We should have done. Well, we've given you enough chances. You can pretend to kill yourself. Oh, can I not block? How do I block? Where's the block option? Report user. No, I just want to block you. Huh. Where's my block option? Where's my block option, chat? What the fuck? That's weird. Why don't I know? I blocked somebody just recently. Hide user. I just want to block. I'm confused. Anyway, remember if you like the videos, like, subscribe, comment, share, support the channel if you want. Appreciate it. Thanks. The end.